And starting webinar. All right, welcome everyone. I'll do a quick introduction of myself. So my name is Emma Shinall. I lead the incentives team here at PowerFlex. And my team and I are really excited for all of you who have joined us that are hopefully interested in adopting some EV charging solutions at your organizations and sites. And we're really excited to talk through some of the funding opportunities that should ultimately help reduce your cost in meeting some of your organization's EV charging goals. So to briefly cover the agenda we're going to be going through today, first I'm going to kick us off with just talking a little bit about PowerFlex, who we are, what we do, and then we'll dive into some incentive programs available in Massachusetts, and then we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. So starting off with who we are as PowerFlex. So PowerFlex is a clean technology solutions company making the transition to carbon-free electrification and transportation possible through things like EV charging, solar, storage, and energy management systems as well. So we work with anyone from property developers, sustainability teams, operations teams, all the way to fleet managers, IT professionals, and even drivers to help turn their sites into green energy hubs. And how do we do that? So PowerFlex has a suite of solutions that includes commercial solar, energy storage, microgrids, EV charging, and also intelligent energy management software called PowerFlex X. And PowerFlex X basically helps our customers monitor and optimize their on-site energy assets and systems. So in addition to kind of that suite of solutions, PowerFlex is also going to be your all-in-one provider from everything from site validations to initial development planning, all the way through construction, and then even post-construction through offering maintenance and software services. And the best part is when you work with PowerFlex, you have that one point of contact for all of your clean tech solutions and products. So as I just mentioned previously, PowerFlex really manages a project from start to finish. We're here as your partner to make sure that the project fits your needs, and all you have to hopefully do at the end of the day is press the on button. Really quickly, I'd like to just give kind of a visual shout out to some of the customers that we've been so fortunate enough to work with and deliver some of these clean energy solutions I just covered. And then for those of you who may be unfamiliar with PowerFlex's history, so we are majority owned by EDF Renewables, and the EDF group holds over 70 years of experience in energy and then over 35 years of experience in renewable energy specifically. So focusing just on EV charging, which is really what we're going to be talking about today, PowerFlex is the #1 provider of large-scale EV charging solutions, and we're the 4th largest public level 2 charging station network in the US. So we're really proud to have installed well over 15,000 chargers nationwide to date. Alrighty, now we'll dive into the fun stuff, the dollar signs, and there's just a few things I want to note before the rest of my team kind of dives into the specifics of some incentive programs. The first thing I want to kind of clarify or just have you keep in mind as we talk through these things is that every program has varying scopes and or what we like to call eligible costs. So some programs may cover just the purchase of chargers. Some programs may cover the purchase of chargers, the purchase of software services, and any make-ready work on site. And any kind of combination of those things exists out there nationwide. So we'll talk a little bit about those specifics today, but it's important to mention that, you know, truly to see the impact an incentive program could have on your site or your project, something you may have in mind, the best thing to do is going to be to reach out to us at sales@powerflex.com so we can get that specific address, get some preliminary ideas of what range of chargers you may be thinking about, so we can really demonstrate and estimate the impact the cost reduction that you could be seeing with some of these incentives, because as you'll see here in a second, it can get very complicated, estimating what funding you'll get here and there and so forth. Additionally, we just have to mention too that these programs are designed to reduce costs or kind of reimburse actually incurred costs. These programs aren't designed to allow applicants to make a profit off of the incentive program. So you won't see anyone covering more than 100% of eligible costs, and almost all programs require copies of invoices, maybe even proof of payment, just to prove like what those incurred costs actually were. And then most importantly, why we're kind of hosting this webinar today and why my team here at PowerFlex exists is that PowerFlex will manage incentive applications on your behalf. We don't just mean submitting the application and saying, okay, there you go, you're all set. We mean managing all the way through closeout until you get that reimbursement or all costs have been reduced and the application is finalized. So we'll talk a little bit more about what actually applying for an application looks like and kind of that continued timeline through construction and closeout. But please keep that in mind. If anything seems a bit overwhelming or daunting, that's exactly why we're here. Our job is to solely take some of those things and details and coordination off of your plate. And this is really just to kind of inform you of what's out there. So I'll go ahead and dive into our first program, and I'm going to pass it off to one of our incentive experts, Janelle, to talk about it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Janelle Lindstrom. I'm one of the incentive experts based in San Diego on our team at PowerFlex. And today I will be going over the Massachusetts Electric Vehicle Incentive Program, aka Massey VIP. So Massey VIP is a grant program administered by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, and they're offering roughly $37 million in total funding. So applications are currently open and processed on a rolling basis until budget is reached for the L2 offerings. The program is split up into 4 program offerings that fit a variety of site types. This includes public access charging, workplace and fleet, multi-unit dwelling and educational campuses, and direct current fast charging. So the DCFC program is closed with no current plans for reopening. But if you are interested, please feel free to reach out to our team and we can keep you updated on any new program announcements that we hear back. So each program offering has its own set of eligibility criteria to qualify. If you are pursuing public access charging, each site must provide 24/7 access availability, no less than 12 hours a day and 7 days per week. Workplace and fleets require projects to have at least 15 employees and allow access to all EV drivers on site. If you plan to apply for the multi-unit dwelling and educational campus offering, your building must have at least 5 units and your campus must have at least 15 students on site. All EV drivers on site must have access to the chargers as well. For the DCFC offering, they had similar rules to the public access program when it was open. So it also required 24/7 access availability or access for 12 hours a day, 7 days per week if the site had restrictions. Across all 4 offerings, though, there are some general eligibility requirements. This includes that we cannot order equipment nor start installation work until the approval letter from the program is received. We must complete construction within 6 months if your site is an existing location, and by 24 months if your site is a new construction. And lastly, we must operate and maintain the chargers and provide station data for 3 years from the date the chargers become operational. Next slide. All right, so jumping into funding. So funding through Massey VIP alone covers all installation and charging station equipment costs. We are able to stack funding with the utility incentive programs in Massachusetts, such as National Grid and Eversource. However, only charging equipment will be covered through Massey VIP if you do decide to stack. Installation costs will not be covered by Massey VIP if you are stacking funding with the utility Make Ready program. All that being said, funding is capped at $50,000 a site. And again, to reiterate, eligible costs through Massey VIP alone would include the EV charging units and related hardware, station installation, and electrical supply upgrades and separate payment modules. Eligible costs for stacking Mass EVIP and a utility program would only cover the EV charging units and related hardware and any separate payment modules. For both scenarios, though, networking and software fees, maintenance, and warranties are ineligible costs in the program. So if you look to the chart on your right, this just breaks down the maximum funding amounts you can receive for each offering. So public access charging sites can receive up to 100% eligible costs covered at government-owned properties and up to 80% at all other locations. Workplace, fleet, and multi-unit dwelling educational campuses can receive up to 60% of eligible costs covered. And the DCFC program, when it was active, had offered up to 100% eligible costs covered at government-owned property and up to 80% at all other locations. So for example, if you have a college campus looking to fund chargers solely through Mass EVIP and you have $80,000 in project costs, you can receive up to 60% of that, up to $50,000. So your award would be that $80,000 multiplied by that 60%, and your award would amount to $48,000. Another example, if you have a public government-owned property receiving funding only from Mass VIP and you have $100,000 in project costs, while you're technically eligible to get up to 100% cost covered, you would only be able to receive $50,000 due to the funding being capped at $50,000 a site. So this is an important thing to consider when you are calculating your potential awards. There is that $50,000 site cap that you would be limited to. Next slide. Oh, I think that's it. So that about wraps up Mass EVIP. This is a very straightforward program, and our team has worked very closely with the program administrators throughout this past year. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our team at sales@powerflex.com, and we can get you those answers that you need.
Awesome. Thanks, Janelle. I'll pass the baton over to Tess now to talk about Eversource.
Perfect. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Tess Anacker. I am also one of the incentive experts here at PowerFlex. And the next program that we will be diving into is the Massachusetts Eversource program. So this program is currently open and rolling, and it is for customers in the Massachusetts Eversource service territory. Eversource spans multiple states, but we will be just talking about their Massachusetts program today. So a lot of rebate programs encourage you to apply for other funding to stack rebates. But for the Massachusetts Eversource program, they actually require applicants to apply for state or federal funding, like the Mass EVIP program that Janelle just spoke about, if the site is eligible. So when stacking Eversource with a program like Mass EVIP, Eversource will take whatever funding amount is provided from Mass EVIP and subtract that amount from the Eversource award. So that is just to ensure that you are not profiting from any of these programs, like Emma had mentioned earlier. So they do have some port requirements. So you must install a minimum of 2 level 2 ports or 1 DCFC port, and they will fund a maximum of 10 ports. They also do offer an enhanced incentive for sites that are located within an environmental justice community. So you'll see that map on the right side of the screen that depicts the EJCs within Massachusetts. So if you have a site that is in the Eversource territory that is also within one of those EJCs, you can unlock a higher rebate amount for your site. So Eversource does offer 3 different funding routes. The first is the public and workplace program, the multi-unit dwelling program, and they also offer a fleet program. So next slide, we can get into some of the specifics with the public and workplace program. So through this program, they offer a charger rebate, a networking rebate for level 2 projects only, and then they also offer a customer side and a utility side infrastructure rebate. So customer side infrastructure work refers to the work that is needed to power EV chargers on the customer side of the meter. So that would include things like the panel, conduits, wiring, etc. And then the utility side infrastructure work refers to the work to get the site ready for chargers on the utility side of the meter. So just wanted to quickly make that distinction. Some additional site requirements for this funding route are that public chargers must have practical public access, meaning no less than 12 hours a day, 7 days per week. And they do offer up to 100% of cost coverage, so you really can unlock a lot of funding through the Massachusetts Eversource program. So getting into some of the funding specifics on the right side here, you will notice that for private workplace charging sites, they only offer the customer side and utility side infrastructure incentive. So the EV charger and networking rebate are not available to this customer segment. The funding is quite complex for this program, so just to give an example to make it a little more digestible, let's say you are applying for a public site that is located within an income EJC, and you are applying for 10 level 2 ports. You can get up to $52,000 for the EV charger rebate, up to $4,800 for the networking rebate, up to $170,000 for the customer side infrastructure incentive, and then Eversource will also fund up to 100% of the utility side infrastructure work. So going to the next slide, we can get into the DCFC portion of this rebate. So just to give an example for a DCFC project, let's say you're applying for a public site that is located within an EJC and you're installing 10 DCFC ports that have an output of 50 to 149 kilowatts. You can get $400,000 for the EV charger rebate. And then for the DCFC program, they actually don't offer a networking rebate, but you can also get up to $500,000 for the customer side infrastructure incentive, and then Eversource will fund up to 100% of the utility side infrastructure work as well. And then also just wanted to quickly note that they do also make a distinction between the output levels of the DCFCs. So there are separate rebate amounts for the 50 to 149 kilowatts, and then 150 plus, you can get a higher rebate amount there. So moving on to the next program, we'll dive into some of the specifics with the multi-unit dwelling program. So through this funding route, they offer a charger rebate, a networking rebate, and then a customer side and utility side infrastructure rebate as well. And then as opposed to the public and workplace program, the multi-unit dwelling program does not offer a DCFC rebate. They only offer rebates for level 2 chargers, which is pretty standard for multifamily programs. And they also require for sites to be eligible that the parking spaces must be non-deeded, unassigned spaces, unless 20% or more of all parking spaces get chargers. So if less than 20% of all parking spaces have chargers, then the parking spaces with chargers must be shared and they cannot be reserved for individuals. And then getting into the funding table on the right, it is also broken out by whether or not your site qualifies as an EJC. So just to give another example here, if you're applying for, let's say, 5 level 2 chargers for a multifamily site that is located within an income EJC, you can get $26,000 for the EV charger rebate, $2,400 for the networking rebate, up to $85,000 for the customer side infrastructure incentive, plus 100% of utility side infrastructure costs. And then going to the next slide. So yeah, now getting into the fleet portion of the Eversource program. The offerings for this program include a charger rebate, a customer side infrastructure, and utility side infrastructure rebate. So for this program, they do not offer a networking rebate. Just wanted to point that out. And also, they have different segments within this program in addition to the EJC segments. So they also have a distinction between public fleets and private fleets. So for a fleet to qualify as a public fleet, they would have to be a public transit or government-owned fleet. And the benefit there is that you are able to access an EV charger rebate. Private fleets are not eligible for an EV charger rebate. They are only eligible for the infrastructure incentives. And I also wanted to note that they did have a DCFC rebate for fleets, but that has closed as of December 1st of 2023. So just wanted to point that out, that they only offer rebates for level 2 chargers now. And then just to give an example, I'll give one for a public fleet. So for a public fleet that is located within an EJC that is installing 10 ports, you can get $52,000 for the EV charger rebate, $170,000 for the customer side infrastructure incentive, plus 100% of the utility side infrastructure costs. So you can really unlock a lot of funding through this program depending on the site type and location. So if you have any project-specific questions, you can feel free to reach out to our team at sales@powerflex.com. We would be happy to assist you with that. So that is all for the Massachusetts Eversource program. So now I'll pass it back to Janelle to talk about the next program.
Hi everyone. So I'll also be going over the Massachusetts National Grid EV Make Ready program. So this program, applications are currently open and taken on a rolling basis until budget is reached. This program is structured pretty much the exact same as the Eversource program Tess just discussed. There's just different funding caps between the two programs, but essentially the rules are all the same. National Grid offers up to 100% in incentives to cover electrical make-ready infrastructure and charging equipment if eligible for applicants in National Grid service territory. So the diagram on the right just gives a quick breakdown of the different project components that can be covered under this program. So for utility side infrastructure, you can get the distribution network, transformers, meters, and conductors covered. Customer side infrastructure is also covered. This would include panels, conductors, boring, trenching, and conduit. And the program also offers a charger and networking rebate, which would cover hardware, networking equipment, and networking services as well. There are certain eligibility criteria that must be met in order to get the chargers and networking covered, but I'll go into that shortly in the next slide. But for eligible project types, the program is split up into 3 different offerings covering public and workplace, multi-unit dwellings, and fleets. Enhanced funding amounts are available for communities in environmental justice and low-income communities, and a GIS map of these communities can be found on National Grid's website. This is something we can help you navigate to as well. So some general eligibility requirements for the program include that you must operate and maintain the chargers in addition to providing station data for 4 years from the EVSC activation date. And similar to Eversource, applicants are required to apply for any additional funding sources they are eligible for example, Mass CVIP. So when stacking these programs, National Grid will subtract whatever additional funding is received when calculating your overall award. And this is something our incentives team will work with you on in applying for these other programs, just to be sure we're maximizing your funding and getting every dollar that you would be eligible for. Next slide, please. All right, so for funding, again, All similar rules as Eversource, just different funding caps, which you can see in the table there. So projects applying under public and workplace do have access to charger rebates, which can fund up to 10 ports for L2s, and also a networking rebate for public L2 projects and customer side and utility side infrastructure incentives. So public chargers must be available 24/7 and no less than 12 hours per day, 7 days a week if the site has access restrictions. Employee-only chargers at a workplace are ineligible for the charger rebate since it is a private site, but they can still receive funding to cover electrical infrastructure. The networking rebate is only offered to public L2 projects and covers a maximum of $480 per port over a 4-year networking contract. Next slide. All right, so this slide just breaks down the DCFC funding amounts for public and workplace. Again, networking is not available for DCFC projects, and the rebates are calculated a bit differently here. They are calculated based off the charger's power output in kilowatts instead of the number of ports that we saw in the L2 offering. Again, same rules apply here. Public chargers must be available 24/7 and no less than 12 hours per day, 7 days a week if the site has access restrictions. And lastly, DCFC charger rebates are capped at $400,000 a site. So as a quick example, if you have a public DCFC site in an environmental justice community and you're looking to install 50 kilowatt chargers, you are looking at a maximum of $40,000 per port, covering up to 100% of the eligible project costs, up to that $400,000 cap per site. Next slide. Okay, so for MED funding, this offering also gives you access to the charger rebates, the networking rebate, and customer side and utility side infrastructure incentives. Some eligibility criteria include that you must have at least 5 residential units. The charging stations do not need to be publicly accessible, but they must be open and available for all residents of the property to use. If your property has parking spaces that are deeded or assigned to specific residents or drivers, then you must install chargers at 20% or greater of all the site's parking spaces. DCFC ports are eligible for the MED program, but they would be incentivized at the L2 level. So this chart here just breaks down the funding amounts for the charger rebate, and infrastructure incentives. Although it says level 2 there, the DCFCs would be incentivized at the same level. So yeah, next slide. All right, so lastly for fleets, projects applying under the fleet offering can receive charger rebates, only for public fleets though. And customer side and utility side infrastructure rebates are also covered for the fleet offering as well. Networking rebates are not offered for fleets. It doesn't matter if you're public or private. The networking rebate is not available for this offering, unfortunately. So for public fleets, this would include public transit or government-owned fleets. And to reiterate, private fleets are ineligible for the charger rebate, but they can still receive incentives to cover utility side and customer side infrastructure. And in the next slide, it just breaks down the DCFC funding breakdowns. Oh, yeah, there you go. Again, networking is not available for DCFC projects or fleets as a whole. And the rebates here for the chargers are calculated based off the power output in kilowatts instead of the number of ports that we would see in the level 2s. So this wraps up the National Grid EV Make Ready program. Again, very lucrative program. A lot of different components can be covered with funding. So if you have any questions, please send those over to sales@powerflex.com and our team can jump in and help you out. Now I'll pass back over to Emma.
Thanks, Janelle, and thanks so much, Tess. Really quickly before I dive into a bit of a overview on, we've talked about the funding programs, we've talked about eligibility and the dollar signs, but what does the actual kind of timeline and process look like in general for a lot of these programs? But before I do, I just want to quickly shout out or highlight a few other incentive programs that are available in the state of Massachusetts. So typically coming out of other smaller scale utilities. So Hudson Light and Power, Westfield Gas and Electric also have some valuable incentives available that we can support with. We just kind of wanted to highlight the larger territories in today's webinar. So diving into the timeline. So every step of this process that I'm going to walk through, I want to reiterate again that this is something that my team can manage and help coordinate. So typically at the start of this process, we call it kind of the pre-application period. This is the time where PowerFlex will be working with you to kind of get a sense of the ideal project for your organization's needs and your site's needs, and we'll come up with that preliminary design and project quote. And along that same process, my team will be kind of gathering all of the required information to submit a thorough and valuable application to the incentive program. So once we submit that application, every program in terms of turnaround time varies. I've seen as quick as just 1 to 2 weeks, and I've seen as long as 3 to 4 months. Those are some things that we can advise on a case-by-case basis as we work with the actual incentive program. We've kind of picked up on those historical trends, but typically the incentive program will review and then, of course, hopefully approve of that application. And then at that point, this is typically when the site host will sign a funding agreement with that incentive program, just simply stating that you've given authorization for a project to occur, you understand the terms and conditions of the funding program, et cetera. And then also around that time, you're typically signing an agreement with PowerFlex so that we can begin the project itself. So then we'll move into that project in progress or process stage where the actual installation and construction is occurring. So again, that can vary depending on the scope of the project. If infrastructure like that customer and utility make-ready work is necessary, or if the site is already prepared and we can just move in for an installation, all of that will vary timeline-wise. But throughout that construction period, my team is working really closely with the project manager assigned to the project here at PowerFlex. We're checking in on any milestones an incentive program may require, and also making sure to collect any of the required final documentation along the way. So that will include things like final inspection card proof, issued permit proof, photos of the chargers, collecting serial numbers, all kinds of stuff. So we'll be solely responsible for gathering all of those items effectively, and then we'll prepare and submit that final documentation to the incentive program to say, hey, look, project's done. We've done what we agreed to do. Please release the incentive money. So typically, the turnaround time for programs can vary there as well in that review period of the final documentation. But within a few weeks, the incentive program should review the final documentation. If they have questions, we'll address and coordinate those. But hopefully at the end of the day, they will approve of all the final documentation in the project, and then they release the funds, the incentive funds to the site host. And PowerFlex's kind of effort and support doesn't stop there. So now the chargers are operational, the project is complete, but most incentive programs do have a data reporting requirement associated with them that PowerFlex will actually manage and handle on your behalf if you so wish. So this is typically usage data for the chargers, and every program is different. Some require it for 3 years, some require it for all the way up to 10 years, all at different frequencies, monthly, quarterly, biannually. So we will work all of that out and manage it on your behalf, so you won't need to worry about breaking any of the terms and conditions with the program. So that's just kind of a general timeline of what the entire process looks like, all the things that my team can kind of support on your behalf with. And now I think we have just a few minutes for maybe one question here. Tess, I'm going to have you answer this if you will. We're going to ask, what are some common challenges for organizations applying for clean energy funding, like some of the programs we reviewed today?
Yeah, so I would say that the majority of challenges happen with incomplete applications or just knowledge gaps in the available funding. Programs are all different, like we saw today. They all have different nuances in their requirements, and it can be really hard to keep track of all of those and understand those. So customers have found it really helpful for our team to jump in. We've done a ton of research and reaching out to the program before we even submit an application, just to be sure we're fully understanding what's required and ensure a seamless process throughout. So our customers have found a lot of value in that. Also, if there are any revisions or corrections needed in your application, again, we already have a very established working relationship with these program administrators. So typically, if any of those issues do come up, they usually let us know pretty far in advance and we can get those resolved right away. So we're really here just to make the rebate process easier for you and to take on those challenges and tackle them for you.
Yeah, thanks, Tess. Yeah, fully agreed. With every program having kind of different requirements and terms and conditions, and I was just speaking on not even the front end of an application, but also, most programs require various levels of final documentation that they can be extremely particular about. So one program may prefer their invoices. So you prove what costs you've incurred to look one way, one program wants them to look another way. And that's kind of the role that we can play in supporting you as the site host, because we've submitted applications, we've closed out projects with these incentive programs, so we kind of know what they're looking for. And if it is a program we haven't actually submitted an application for just yet, like Tess mentioned, we've at least engaged with the program. We know what questions to kind of ask up front, like, hey, by the way, if we have an application we want to submit tomorrow, we just want to make sure we understand XYZ that we see on your website and in your manuals. And we try and get as much information up front as possible. So as Tess mentioned, it's streamlined. We're hopefully not running into any speed bumps along the way, and we can kind of get ahead of and predict what exactly they're looking for, because they sometimes are not super clear. So again, we want to thank you all for attending today. It was so much fun to talk about some of the funding programs we've been fortunate enough to work with in Massachusetts. I want to reiterate too that PowerFlex works nationwide. So we've installed over 15,000 chargers across the US. So we're not limited to just Massachusetts. If you're an organization that has sites in multiple states or other locations, we've worked with a lot of incentive programs in other states as well. So please reach out to us and we can kind of review that entire portfolio if that's what you would like. But again, thank you all so much, and please reach out to sales at PowerFlex if you have any questions. We hope to hear from you soon.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.